When the humans stepped into the royal menagerie, something impossible happened. Every predator stopped moving, not because of commands, not because of cages, but because something in them remembered. The glass wolves lowered their crystal antlers, slow and deliberate, as if acknowledging an old threat they had never been taught to name. The furnace cats stopped burning. Their internal flames folded inward like dying stars, refusing to go out in panic. Even the gravity bears, creatures that bent mass around their own rage, quietly lowered their claws and pressed themselves against the ground as if trying to become smaller than existence itself. Above them all, the moon's serpent opened 6 silver eyes, and then it did something no one in the Empire had ever witnessed. It hid. The royal menagerie of Zelen was not a place of beauty. It was a declaration, a monument built from captured nightmares. Every creature inside had destroyed colonies, ended wars, erased civilizations. Emperor Valk did not collect them for study. He collected them for proof that everything could be chained. Kings were brought here to break. Generals were brought here to kneel. And prisoners were brought here to understand what power truly meant. But today, something different was walking through those halls. A barefoot human. Chains hung from his wrists, scraping softly against the metal floor. His name was Elias Vale, but the Empire had already renamed him, Specimen Terra. As if stripping him of a name could strip him of meaning, the guards expected fear. They expected trembling. They expected the universe's weakest species to confirm every assumption they had ever made. But the menagerie did not cooperate with their expectations. Because fear had already arrived before the human even spoke. Elias did not look around in awe. He did not beg. He did not plead. He simply walked forward like someone who had already survived worse things than this entire palace combined. The first enclosure shattered the illusion. The glass wolves pressed backward in perfect sync, not attacking, not growling, retreating. As if something about the human's presence rewrote instinct itself, the announcer tried to laugh it off. A malfunction, stress response, environmental imbalance. But then the furnace cats proved otherwise. 4 living infernos from the volcanic moons of Mars. Beasts bred in pressure so extreme that entire ecosystems evaporated in their presence. They had once burned a diplomatic fleet without hesitation. Now they turned away from Elias Vale like frightened cubs. The oldest female even shielded her offspring, not from him, but from the idea of him. Elias looked at them for a long moment. And there was something in his expression that the Empire could not decode. Not dominance, not cruelty, not even pity, recognition. As if he understood exactly what it meant to be afraid and still be forced to move forward. Some fears were taught, but others were inherited, deep in biology, older than language. Older than civilization. The Emperor rose from his throne. Impossible, he said quietly. No prey species does this. No scent should reach every lineage at once. No presence should override instinct. Elias finally lifted his eyes, and when he spoke, his voice did not carry aggression. Only truth. I am not commanding them. A silence spread across the gallery. Then what are they doing? Elias paused for a moment, listening, and that single word changed everything. Because the Empire suddenly realized something terrifying. The creatures were not reacting to force. They were reacting to memory, and memory cannot be chained. The silence in the royal menagerie did not fade, it deepened, like a pressure building behind reality itself. Guards shifted uneasily, weapons suddenly feeling heavier than they should have. Nobles stopped whispering. Even Emperor Valk, seated high above the arena, felt something he had never allowed himself to feel in his own palace. Uncertainty. Elias Vale stood among monsters like a man who did not belong to their fear hierarchy. And yet, nothing attacked him. Not a single cage dared break first. Because something older than obedience was happening. Recognition. The Emperor's voice cracked through the chamber. You are only flesh. Elias did not look at him immediately. So were the things that tried to eat us. That single sentence did not rise, it fell. Into every mind present, heavy, uncomfortable, undeniable. The throne gallery went cold. For the first time since the menagerie was built, a guard took a step back from the cages instead of toward them. Then the Emperor raised his hand, and the next gate opened. A sound like grinding bones echoed through the arena floor. Chains lifted, metal screamed, and something enormous crawled out of the dark beneath the arena. The Crimson Devourer. a war-born apex organism from the shattered pit worlds of Kar. No eyes worth speaking of, only hunger, only motion, only purpose. It had never hesitated, never paused. Never chosen mercy because mercy did not exist in its design. It turned toward Elias Vale, and the Emperor smiled, because this was certainty, no fear response, no instinct confusion. Only hunger and target. Now, Valk whispered, we will see what you are. The Devourer struck. The arena shook so violently that dust rained from the ceiling like collapsing stars. The first impact alone cracked the stone floor. Nobles screamed, but Elias did not run. He moved. Not like a warrior, not like a soldier, like someone who understood timing more than strength. The Devourer lunged again, faster. Elias stepped aside, not away, not backward, sideways, as if he had already read the movement before it was born. Chains lifted in his hands, not as shackles anymore, but as tools. The Devourer struck a third time. This time, Elias let it come close enough to touch him. Then he twisted. Wrapped the chain around one hooked limb mid-motion, and used the creature's own momentum against it. For the first time in its existence, the Devourer lost balance. It slammed into an arena pillar. The impact echoed like a planetary strike, but it was not dead, not even close. It was learning, and learning made it dangerous. Elias climbed it, not away from it, onto it. Across burning muscle and armored hide, moving with a precision that did not match panic or desperation. He reached a narrow seam beneath its outer plating, a nerve channel. A vulnerability no one in the Empire had ever mapped, because no one had ever survived long enough to study it. Elias pressed the chain into it, and the Devourer froze, not from pain. From interruption, like a system suddenly denied its primary function. The arena fell silent again, but this silence was different. It was not fear, it was disbelief. Then it happened. Every cage in the menagerie responded at once. Not with roars, not with chaos, but with a low, rising pulse. A unified biological acknowledgement, predator to predator, survival to survival. The sound vibrated through stone, bone, and glass. The Emperor stood slowly now. For the first time in his reign, he was no longer certain he understood what he owned. Elias dropped from the Devourer's back, landing hard but steady. Breathing, alive, unbroken, he looked up at the throne. "I do not want your empire," he said. The words were simple. But they carried weight heavier than the palace itself. "I want my ship, my crew, and coordinates out." The Devourer remained frozen behind him, not defeated, not killed. But obeying a new reality it had not chosen. Around it the entire menagerie shifted, not toward rebellion, not toward escape, toward alignment. As if every creature had just learned the same truth at the same time. The Emperor's empire was not built on cages, it was built on assumption. That power meant control, that fear meant obedience. That monsters only bowed to greater monsters. But Elias Vale had proven something older, something far worse. Monsters do not fear strength, they fear recognition, they fear being understood. Because anything understood can be survived. The first lock broke open by itself, then another, glass shattered without sound, metal bent without resistance. Gravity fields twisted away from their own anchors, and the royal menagerie of Zelen became something else entirely. A release of everything the Empire thought it had mastered. But none of it touched Elias. They moved around him, not attacking, not fleeing, circling, respecting distance, not because he was their master, but because he was the one thing they could not categorize. By dawn, Emperor Valk issued the order he had never believed he would speak. Release him. By dusk, Elias Vale stood aboard his ship. His crew waiting, his chains gone, and one final transmission echoed across the spiral. Do not measure humans by their bodies, measure them by the monsters that refuse to attack them. Years later, the royal menagerie stood empty, preserved, not as a prison, but as a warning. Visitors walked through its halls in silence, reading the inscription carved into the stone where Elias once stood. Here entered a human, and every predator remembered fear.